Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into a topic that almost sounds like science fiction.
It really does.
Organoids, those microscopic 3D models of organs that scientists are growing in labs.
Very wide.
Yeah. We're going to be looking closely at some research you shared about a really important ingredient in this whole process,
Okay.
the M2 supplement.
Sounds mysterious, right?
It does. So before we get into that, why should anyone listening care about this teeny tiny supplement?
Well, it turns out M2 is kind of a key to unlocking this crazy potential of organoids. I mean, we can be talking about growing organs for transplants, testing out new drugs without using animals,
That would be huge.
and even coming up with treatments that are perfectly matched to your needs.
That's incredible. So, okay, let's start with the basics. What exactly is this M2 supplement?
So think of it like a special nutrient cocktail that's designed with all the stuff these mini organs need to, like, really thrive.
Okay, so like a superfood smoothie for organoids.
Exactly. We're talking growth factors, antioxidants, nutrients, and even the things that help the cells stick together, to form the right structures.
So it's not just about keeping those cells alive, it's about helping them grow and organize and function just like a real organ, right?
Yeah, totally. One of the coolest things M2 does is it boosts cell viability, which basically means it helps the cells live longer and stay healthier. Imagine being able to grow an organoid that lasts for months or even years. That just opens up so many research possibilities.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. I just started taking these personalized vitamins based on my DNA.
Oh, cool.
But imagine having a mini organ grown from your own cells to test treatments on.
Yeah, and that's where M2 is really playing a crucial role.
Mhm.
To get those treatments exactly right for you, scientists have to make sure that organoid is growing perfectly. And M2 is a big part of that. They can even adjust the concentration of M2 in the mix, sort of like fine-tuning a recipe to get it perfect.
That level of precision is amazing. But I'm guessing growing these mini organs isn't as simple as just adding some M2 and poof, you've got a mini organ.
Right. All right. It's not quite that easy.
It's got to be more complicated than that.
There's a lot of fine-tuning that goes on.
So how does M2 fit into that whole process?
Well, one of the things it does is it helps the cells multiply quickly, so the organoid grows faster and bigger.
So like a growth spurt for cells.
Exactly. And not only do they grow faster, but M2 also helps them specialize. Think of it like it helps them figure out their job. Are they going to be a heart cell or a liver cell or a brain cell? It all depends on what type of organoid they're forming.
So M2 is like giving them instructions to build a specific organ, not just a random blob of cells.
Precisely. Like, let's say scientists are growing a mini gut. They might add extra EGF to the M2 mix. EGF is a growth factor that helps cells multiply. So it's especially important for organs like the gut that need to expand really quickly.
That's so fascinating. So each organoid might need a slightly different recipe of M2 depending on what it's going to become.
Exactly. It's all about getting those conditions just right for whatever organoid they're growing. And speaking of tailoring, M2 also plays a crucial role in making sure the organoids develop the right architecture.
What do you mean by architecture?
Well, just like a real organ has a specific structure, like all the layers of the stomach or the folds of the brain, M2 helps the cells organize themselves into that same 3D structure. Without that structure, the organoid just wouldn't work the way it's supposed to.
So it's not just about creating a bunch of cells, it's like creating a tiny organ that's just like the real thing.
Exactly. And all of this growth and specialization that takes energy. Those cells are working overtime to build these complex structures. They need fuel to keep going. And that's where M2 comes in again.
So M2 is like their personal caterer, making sure they have the energy to build these mini organs.
That's a great way to put it. It helps reduce something called metabolic stress, which is basically like when the cells are overworked and don't have enough energy to do their job. By giving them the right nutrients and antioxidants, M2 helps those cells stay energized and focused on building that miniature organ.
That makes sense. And I imagine consistency is really important in experiments. You want to make sure that those organoids are growing in a predictable way every time.
Absolutely. That's another thing M2 helps with. It minimizes variability, which basically means the organoids are more likely to grow and develop consistently.
Okay.
And that's super important for researchers because it makes their experiments more reliable and reproducible.
So it's like quality control for mini organs.
Exactly.
This is all so cool, but what does it actually mean for, for people like me? What can we actually do with these souped up mini organs grown with M2?
Okay, well, now this is where things get really interesting. The applications are pretty mind-blowing. One of the most promising areas is disease modeling.
Okay, tell me more.
So imagine having a personalized model of your own liver right there in a dish affected by, a specific disease. Scientists can actually use organoids to study diseases in a way that was never possible before.
So it's like having a miniature model to experiment on without, all the ethical concerns.
Exactly. Like researchers can use tumor organoids to study how cancer cells behave and respond to different treatments.
So we could potentially test out different therapies on these mini tumors and see what works best for a specific patient.
Yeah. It's opening up incredible possibilities for personalized medicine. We could even grow organoids from your own cells and test how you specifically would respond to different drugs.
Whoa.
Yeah,
So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we could have treatments that are designed just for you.
that's the goal. And M2 is a crucial part of that.
It's amazing to think about. Okay, what about drug screening? Scientists are always looking for new ways to test new drugs. Are organoids useful for that too?
Oh, absolutely. In the past, new drugs were tested on animals before humans,
Right.
but organoids offer a way to test them that could be more accurate and also more ethical.
So we could use these mini organs to see how a drug might affect human cells before even thinking about testing on animals.
Exactly. And since we can grow organoids that mimic specific organs, we can test how a drug might affect the liver, the heart, the kidneys, any organ we're interested in.
That's incredible. It could really speed up the drug development process,
Yeah.
make it much safer. You mentioned ethical concerns earlier. Are there any ethical considerations with growing these mini organs?
Yeah, that's a really important point, and it's something that scientists and ethicists are thinking about very carefully as this technology keeps developing. Like one thing that's being debated is the use of organoids that come from embryonic stem cells.
Right.
These cells have huge potential for regenerative medicine, but using them raises questions about, where those cells come from.
I can see how that would be a really complex issue. Are there other ways to do this that, don't have those ethical concerns?
Yeah, scientists are also looking at using induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPSCs.
Yeah.
These are adult cells that have been reprogrammed to act like embryonic stem cells, so they could be a less controversial source for growing organoids. It's really interesting how science is always changing and finding new solutions.
All of this feels so futuristic. It's really exciting. You mentioned regenerative medicine earlier. Can you tell me more about that?
All right, so now we're going even further into science fiction. Imagine we could use organoids to repair or replace damaged organs, like literally growing new organs in a lab that perfectly match your body.
So you're talking about using these mini organs to actually grow full-sized organs that could be used for transplants.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And even though we're not quite there yet, the research is moving so fast. And you know what? M2 is playing a big part in all of this.
It is, of course. I'm starting to think M2 is like the magic ingredient for all of this.
It really is kind of like the secret sauce. Remember how we talked about M2 helping cells live longer and stay healthy?
Yeah.
Well, that's really important for regenerative medicine, because if we're going to use these organoids to repair or replace tissues, they need to survive for a long time.
So it's not just about growing the organoids, it's about keeping them healthy in the long run.
Exactly. M2 is helping to create the perfect environment for those organoids to grow and flourish and, maybe one day become the building blocks for new organs.
Wow. It sounds like we're on the edge of a whole new era in medicine. But I know there are probably still some challenges to overcome before we're growing new organs in a lab.
Yeah, Deb, organoid technology is still pretty new.
Yeah.
One of the big challenges is scalability. Like growing organoids on a large scale for drug screening or regenerative therapies is really difficult and expensive.
So growing a few mini organs in a dish is one thing, but producing them in large quantities for, widespread use is a whole other challenge.
Exactly. And another thing is that while organoids are really good at mimicking the structure and function of organs, they're not perfect. They don't always have all the complex interactions with other cells and tissues that you would see in a real living organism.
So they're a powerful tool for research, but we still need to remember that they're not exactly the same as studying a whole human body.
Right. And then there's the issue of vascularization. Organs in our bodies have all these blood vessels that supply them with oxygen and nutrients.
Right.
Figuring out how to create that same complex system in organoids is really difficult.
I can imagine. So even though we can grow these mini organs, keeping them alive and functioning long term is still a big hurdle.
It is. But researchers are working on it. They're coming up with new techniques like 3D bioprinting and using microfluidic devices to try and make these organoid models more realistic and functional.
It sounds like a really exciting time for organoid research. But how about we bring it back to the listener for a minute? All of this is amazing, but how could these advancements in organoid technology affect their lives in the future?
Well, the potential impact is huge. Imagine a future where we can use organoids to personalize cancer treatments, to test new drugs without using animals, or even to grow new organs for people who need transplants.
It's a future where medicine becomes more personalized and more effective, and a future where we might not need to rely on animal testing anymore.
Right. It's pretty incredible.
It really is. The possibilities are amazing.
Yeah,
It really does feel like we're on the verge of something big.
it really does.
We've covered so much today, from what M2 is to all of these incredible things we can do with organoids. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what are the key takeaways you'd want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the main thing is that M2 might sound like just a small ingredient, but it's really making a huge difference in organoid research. It's helping these mini organs to really thrive and do all the amazing things we've been talking about.
It just shows how even the tiniest things can make a big impact.
Exactly. And the second thing I would say is just how exciting the potential of organoid technology really is. We're talking about changing how we study diseases, how we test drugs, and even how we treat people. It's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in medicine.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable how far we've come, and it feels like we're just getting started. But
Yeah.
before we go, I wanted to touch on something we haven't talked about directly. We've discussed the science and the challenges and everything, but what about the human side of all this? What does this mean for patients and families who are, dealing with diseases and hoping for new treatments?
That's a really important point. I think at the end of the day, all of this research, all of these incredible discoveries, it's all about trying to help people and make their lives better.
It's easy to focus on the technical details, but it's important to remember why we're doing all of this.
Right. Organoid technology gives us a lot of hope for people who might feel like they're running out of options. It could lead to personalized treatments, new therapies, and maybe even cures for diseases that we thought were incurable.
It's really inspiring to see how science is being used to make a difference in people's lives.
It really is.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave everyone listening with a sense of wonder and possibility. We've just scratched the surface of what's possible with organoids, and there's so much more to discover.
Definitely. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and never underestimate what science can achieve.
Who knows, maybe one of you listening will be the one making the next big breakthrough in the world of organoids.
The future of medicine is full of possibilities, so let's embrace them with open minds and work together to make those possibilities a reality.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this amazing journey into the world of M2 and organoids. Until next time, keep exploring.